So good morning, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. So in order to build a good meditation practice and to cultivate some success on this path, we always start with just knowing the technique, right? Knowing how to sit down and what to cultivate and how to cultivate it. Then we move on to a regular kind of cultivation. You want to sit down regularly and actually make time. And there we already come into one of the fields of traditional training, which the Buddha referred to as the training of sila, which is the training of, very often translated as moral conduct, but actually better to be translated as restraint. Okay, so you learn to restrain yourself. And why would I want to restrain myself if I can do basically anything I want to do? The reason for that restraint is that only if you are restrained, then you will experience the underlying suffering which serves as a motivating or pushing force normally in your daily life. And because you're constantly pushed around by it and you would constantly follow it, you wouldn't actually notice that it's suffering. You only notice it if you can't do what you want. Then it comes right up. Then you have to actually deal with it. So we could really say that most of us, for most of our lives, we are busy merely managing or coping with our stress, but we're not actually aiming to uproot it, to end it. So when you're feeling uncomfortable, you're dealing with your discomfort by doing whatever it is that you're normally doing, right? You distract yourself, you entertain, you take a walk, you have some food, you connect with friends and so forth, right? That's our usual way of dealing with discomfort and distress. But the aim of spiritual practice is traditionally to actually uproot that stress so that it doesn't grow back. If you just manage the leaves of a tree, like let's say the leaves of the tree, they're constantly falling into your garden and you don't like your garden to look kind of messy or something like this, so you take a rake and you just rake them away every day. That's managing suffering. That's what we all do all the time. We're constantly busy raking away problems in our life, managing them, like by changing your posture, by scratching, by making yourself comfortable. It just keeps going on and on. There's no end in sight to that. So by restraining ourselves, by, for example, having a regular practice, that's a type of restraint, because maybe you kind of don't want to sit down, but now you set up a regular schedule, you've made an appointment with yourself, like you are restrained by that. Maybe you'd rather watch Netflix or go out, or maybe you figure out, oh, I haven't eaten yet, I'm quite hungry, maybe I should eat, and then I do it later. You kind of want to postpone it and so forth. But no, you're restrained to that practice. You have to do it whether you want to or not. That's suffering right there. So now we sit down and we actually look at that suffering. And we aim to understand it, to understand how it actually arises. And you'll find out it's not really the case that you are suffering because you cannot do what you want to do, but you're suffering because you're doing something inside of your mind that produces tension. And at the root of this activity is simply craving, that what the Buddha referred to as the cause of suffering, like wanting or not wanting. Let's say you're sitting here in this moment, and because you don't want to sit here and you want to eat food, you're suffering now. So what if you were to release this cause of suffering, namely craving, wanting, would the suffering actually end? Yes, of course. Because now there is no more conflict between the present moment and an idea in your mind that you're fixating upon, that you're craving. Like, I'd rather not be here, but I want to be there. I'd rather not be who I am. I would like to be someone else. There's conflict, right? In the moment when you state who I am or what I'm experiencing in this moment is somehow not enough, must be optimized, must be removed, must be cut off, must be dealt with in some way, then you create a future moment in which supposedly you'll be fine once you have dealt with the problem. And that conflict between you right now, the actual fact of your experience, and some fictional idea of how it should be or how it is supposed to be, creates a conflict within your being. So your mind is pulling out to something that is not yet there. And it is that pulling, that craving, that creates tension within your being, literally. The word attention means nothing other than attending, like the word tendon, right? It's a stretching out towards something. And it's that stretch in combination with holding the object that you're stretching out towards, which is clinging, that produces suffering. The experience of tension and stress. That's what you experience as unbearable in this moment. Oh God, when does the bell ring? When does the bell ring? And instead of actually identifying what really it is that makes you suffer, you just hope to deal with it, cope with it, manage it, rather than actually uproot it. And meditation would be that one methodology that gives you access to uprooting suffering, meaning dealing with it for good, rather than just living in a pain-killing mode. Yes? The idea is to really reduce pain. Not to just kill it and then it comes again, and then kill it again, it comes again. Like imagine you have a headache. Take a painkiller, headache's gone. Seems good, right? Next day, headache comes back. Another painkiller, headache's gone. And if you live your life like this, getting up, painkiller in, headache gone, getting up, painkiller in, headache gone, that's a possibility of living, but it is not very skillful, not in the eyes of the Buddha at least. It's not a very skillful way of dealing with our problems, just merely addressing the symptoms rather than the root of the problem. So what if you were going to a doctor that is skillful, that would actually find the root cause of your headaches? Say you're using the wrong pillow. Okay? So the doctor prescribes you a special medical pillow, and then you use that special medical pillow, and voila, 2-3 days in, you're waking up with no headaches. Now you don't even need to take a painkiller anymore, because the headaches are gone. In Tibetan Buddhist traditions, often they compare this to scratching a wound. If you have a wound, it's nice to scratch it, especially when it's about to heal, right? You want to kind of scratch away. It's not, because when it heals, it's itching a little bit sometimes, yes? So you scratch. It's nice to scratch it. But the masters would say, wouldn't it even be nicer not to have a wound first of all, than just to be satisfied with spending a lifetime of scratching away? Why not really deal with the thing that causes the wound first of all? Yes? And so when we practice meditation, that's what we are dealing with. We're not trying to scratch away. We're actually dealing with the real issue. And we are addressing our real need, the true wish for happiness, which is residing within each one of us equally. It's a thing that pulls you left and right. The wish, the desire for true ease, peace, satisfaction, happiness, well-being, joy. So why not go there directly? Why not address directly what the issue is? Like sometimes the Buddha is accused of that, oh, he's been pretty negative. He's only been talking about suffering all the time. He himself has said, I only talk about suffering, and the end of it, that's it. But a lot of people don't know that the end of suffering is the very thing you call happiness. That's what it is. Happiness is always the absence of suffering. The less you suffer, the happier you feel. That's always true for everyone. It's like gravity. It's a universal law. The less you are burdened by whatever it is that resides in your mind that weighs you down, the happier you are. And so the question is, well, why not then unburden yourself straight away, rather than saying, well, I need to first get an Apple Watch, then I can unburden myself. Why connect it to stuff? Right? Why connect it to conditions, your happiness? Why enslave yourself to products and things and people and circumstances so that you say, I can only be happy if the world is like this. And until it is like this, I must suffer. That's slavery. It's the definition of slavery. It's emotional slavery. You're attaching your emotions, your mental well-being, your thoughts, and your whole being to circumstance. So if circumstances are good, you feel like you're happy. Fair enough, but once the circumstances become bad, you'll be dragged right down with them. That's not freedom. Freedom is the independence of circumstances. So your happiness is independent. It stands, no matter what. You're happy regardless of what goes on around you. If someone blames you, you're happy. Someone praises you, you're happy. But you're not happy because you receive praise. You're not sad because you're blamed. That's the difference. So as a practitioner on the spiritual path, what happens is there's a gradual increase of independence. You become more and more independent and free from circumstances, meaning you approach the world with less and less neediness. I need things to be this and that way so I can be happy. In fact, the more needs you have, the more you suffer by definition. There's people that have so many needs that are constantly uncomfortable. Like say high-level needs. You're coming into a 5 or 6 star deluxe executive suite in a hotel, and the first thing you see is there is some dust on the table. And it really irritates you. Right? Why? Is it because of the dust? You figure it out. Is the dust irritating? Really? If that was the case, then the dust must be equally irritating for the maid, the hotel owner, other guests, everybody in the world, because it's the dust. It's not your mind. Right? Is it because what he or she said that you're feeling miserable? Or is it perhaps because of yourself that you're miserable? Are you ready to take on that kind of responsibility for yourself? Are you ready to step into that kind of emancipation and power? To say, well, I'm responsible for myself. I truly am. I don't need X, Y, Z to feel happy. All I need is to release my suffering. That's it. So when I'm stepping up, when I'm going to do that? Tomorrow? When? Right now. That's the only time you can. And you could only do that if you actually become aware of your suffering. And sila, restraint, is that very tool that makes you aware of your suffering. So if you restrain yourselves to a set of rules, like, I'm going to meditate every morning at 7 a.m. for 15 minutes. That's restraint. While I'm meditating, I'm not going to move my body no matter what. That's restraint. So right now, in that restraint, you're actually forced to find creative ways of dealing with your suffering, perhaps even the ability to uproot it. Because you can't move. So you have to become creative. First of all, it is only within that restraint that human beings become actually creative. Sounds really counterintuitive. It's like, what? Within restraint we become creative? Think of the restraint that causes you boredom. There is nothing for you to play with. You're in an empty room, you can't get out. You have to be in there for the next 24 hours. What are you going to do? There's no phone, no distractions. You're going to get creative. That's the birthplace of creativity. And it is that creativity which is one of the fundamental forces in human intelligence, in just natural intelligence. The whole world is creative. Every atom is creative. Well, look around. Nature is really inventive and creative. So are you. You're not separate from that. And to gain access to that, you have to become unoccupied. And in today's day and age particularly, when you can be occupied and unbored all the time, you have no more need to look at yourself. This is the victory of evil, making you totally blind. Not 1 second anymore of not being busy with some stuff. Most of that stuff that really doesn't matter at all. You've forgotten about it within the next 20 seconds as you're scrolling away. It's a time of irrelevance. Just scrolling away. Next, next, next. Even relationships. Swipe left, swipe right, swipe left. It doesn't matter anymore. It's just consumerism at its finest. And people are happily doing it. Because it resonates with our nature to avoid ourselves, to actually deal with the root of the problem. And so restraint would be a very good method for most of us, but it's really unpopular. You see, this center is not a place that is very popular. It's not 100 or 1,000 people. It's not a stadium. Because I'm not teaching popular stuff. Restraint is not popular. Don't do whatever the heck you want. That's a fundamental part of the teaching. And it's the one thing that would actually give you power. It is a person that is well restrained. That's a powerful person. It's a person that's just unrestrained, doing whatever they want, whenever they want. Their power is just leaking everywhere. They have nothing. They're just being pulled left and right by whatever. No strength. So if you want some strength, practice restraint. Or there's a multitude of ways of how you can implement that in your day-to-day life. And it's actually fun once you know that you can do it. You start to respect yourself more and more. You start to appreciate yourself more and more because you're somebody that you can rely on. What you say is law. You can rely upon yourself. If I'm saying I'm going to do this every morning at 7 a.m., it's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not flaky. That way is a way to success. With anything you're doing. It's that kind of perseverance. All right, that's all that comes to mind for today. Are there any questions?